Most people who had hard childhoods are walking around thinking something is wrong with them. And honestly, that might be the biggest lie psychology ever let slide. Because here's the truth: the chaos you survived, the instability, the too much too soon, it didn't just leave scars, it left skills. Real, measurable, science backed psychological skills that most well adjusted, comfortable people will spend decades in therapy trying to develop. I'm not saying your pain was a gift. I'm not doing that. But I am saying this: what grew out of that pain, that part, that's actually kind of extraordinary. And today, we're going to talk about exactly what that looks like. Okay, so I want you to think about the kid you were, the one who had to figure out the temperature of the room before they even took their shoes off at the door. The one who watched faces, listened to footsteps, could tell from the way a door closed whether tonight was going to be okay or not. That kid wasn't anxious. Well, okay, maybe a little, but more than that, that kid was brilliant, and nobody told them. I remember being that kid, having to read the room before I could read a book. And for the longest time, I genuinely thought that was damage. I thought all the hyper-awareness, the self-sufficiency, the weird inability to just ask for help, I thought that was the broken version of me. It took me an embarrassingly long time to realize I wasn't broken, I was forged. So, here are 5 traits that people with hard childhoods carry. Traits that get misread, misunderstood, sometimes straight up pathologized, but are actually signs of elite psychological resilience. Let's go. Okay, the first one, and honestly, this one hit me personally, it's hyper-awareness, that almost uncomfortable ability to read people, like really read them. If you grew up in an unpredictable home, your nervous system didn't have the luxury of just relaxing. Safety wasn't a given, it had to be assessed, constantly. Was mom in a good mood or a bad one? Was the silence in the house calm, or was it that charged kind of silence, the kind that means something's about to happen? You learn to scan a room the way a detective scans a crime scene. Micro-expressions, shifts in tone, the weight behind a pause. Psychology actually has a name for this. Researchers call it heightened social cognition, and it develops specifically in kids who grow up in emotionally unpredictable environments. Now, most people look at this and go, oh, that's just anxiety. And look, to be fair, yeah, it can feel like anxiety. But here's what nobody talks about. This is the exact same skill that makes the best therapists, the best leaders, the best negotiators on the planet. You know that person in a meeting who senses the tension before it erupts? Or the friend who texts you out of nowhere just to check in on the exact day you needed it? Yeah, that's not magic. That's a nervous system that got trained early. So here's the thing. You don't need to turn that off. You just need to stop running it on survival mode. You're not in that house anymore. The danger that built this skill, mostly in the past, but the skill itself, that's yours. Use it on purpose, not out of fear. Okay, number 2, and this one's going to hit different for a lot of you: radical self-sufficiency, which sounds cool on paper, right? But let's be real about what that actually is. It's what happens when the adults around you weren't reliable, so you just stopped needing them. Not dramatically, not on purpose, just quietly, over time, you figured out that asking for help was a kind of gamble you couldn't afford to keep losing, so you stopped asking. You handled things yourself, quietly, efficiently, alone. Research actually calls this an adaptive response, meaning your brain did it on purpose to protect you. It wasn't a flaw, it was a feature, and honestly, it made you incredibly capable. I think about someone I know, grew up with an absent dad and a mom who was fighting her own battles just to stay afloat. By 25, this woman had built a business, put her younger siblings through college, and never once asked anyone for help. Not because she was cold, not because she didn't feel things, but because she'd become a one-person ecosystem. She just didn't know another way to exist. And I think so many of you watching this know exactly what that feels like. The shadow side of it, though, and I'm going to be real with you here, is loneliness. Quiet, aching, nobody sees me loneliness. Because when you're self-sufficient by necessity, not by choice, you start to feel like an island, capable and completely isolated at the same time. So here's the practical piece. You don't need a huge leap of trust. Start small. Let one person carry one thing. See what happens. The world you're in now plays by different rules than the one that built you. Number 3. This one is wild to me, honestly. Deep tolerance for discomfort. Psychology has found that people who went through early hardship develop what's called a higher distress tolerance threshold. In plain English, they can handle things that would absolutely floor most people. Job loss, rejection, grief, uncertainty. They move through it with this steadiness that from the outside looks like composure, but it's so much more than composure. It's like a cellular knowledge, this quiet inner voice that says, I've been here before, in darker places than this, and I got out. There's actually a whole field of research on this. It's called post-traumatic growth. And what it says is that some people don't just return to who they were after adversity, they exceed it. Crazy, right? And I want to be really careful here because I am not saying suffering is good. Nobody should have had their childhood taken from them, full stop. But if it happened, and for a lot of people watching this it did, then the fact that it also made you genuinely harder to break, that's not nothing. That's not a small thing. That's everything. So next time you're in a brutal season and you look around and realize, wait, I'm still standing and people around me are falling apart, don't brush that off. Don't call it just how you are. Call it what it is: earned strength, years of invisible training. Number 4, and this might be my favorite one, fierce empathy. Here's the paradox that genuinely gets me every time I think about it. The people who were never protected often become the most protective. The people who were never truly seen often become the most gifted at seeing others. Research in developmental psychology keeps showing this. People who experienced early emotional neglect, when they do the inner work, tend to become the most empathetic people in any room. Teachers, nurses, artists, activists, the ones who sit with other people's pain without flinching, without rushing to fix it, without minimizing it. Those people, disproportionately, are people who once had no one to sit with theirs. Think about the friend who always knows what to say when you're falling apart, who shows up in the dark and doesn't try to drag you immediately into the light. That capacity didn't come from a perfect childhood. It came from living in the dark themselves. And here's why this matters to you right now. Your empathy is not a weakness. It's not naivete. It's sophisticated emotional intelligence that the world is genuinely starving for. The question isn't how to protect yourself from feeling too much. The question is how to aim that empathy wisely, including, and I really want you to hear this, back at yourself. And the 5th one, number 5, this one is maybe the most underrated of them all: a fierce relationship with meaning. Adults who had difficult childhoods often have this almost urgent need for their lives to actually matter. Small talk, exhausting. Shallow relationships, they can't do it. Surface level work that doesn't connect to anything bigger, suffocating. They're pulled almost compulsively towards depth, towards truth, towards things that feel real. Psychology calls this existential reflection, and research shows it develops earlier and deeper in people who faced adversity young. While other kids were worried about who was sitting with who at lunch, these kids were quietly asking the big questions. Who am I? Why does any of this matter? What is my life actually for? Forced into maturity early, yes, but also into a kind of wisdom most people don't find until much later, if ever. Now, the frustration, and I say this with warmth, is that this makes ordinary life feel like a bad fit. The job that doesn't mean anything, the relationship that never goes past the surface, the world that keeps insisting shallow things should be enough, and you just can't. You felt too much, seen too much. You know in your bones that time is short and you're not willing to waste it. That refusal, that's a gift. Honestly, it might be the greatest one on this entire list. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. So here's where we land, and I want to say this part slowly. You didn't get the childhood you deserved. That's real. That loss is real. And grieving it, even now as a grown adult, that's completely valid. You're allowed to be sad about what was missing. You're allowed to wish it had been different. Both of those things are true. And inside that same story, there's a version of you that built 5 things most people never will. The ability to read a room with almost scary precision. The capacity to stand on your own 2 feet when everything else is shaking. A tolerance for discomfort that is honestly borderline extraordinary. An empathy so deep that it changes the people who come into contact with it. And a relationship with meaning so fierce that ordinary will never be enough for you. Those aren't accidents. They're not random personality quirks. They are you, shaped by everything you survived. The work now isn't to become someone new. It's to stop apologizing for who you already are. To take everything that was forged in fire and carry it forward, consciously, deliberately, in the direction of a life that finally feels like it belongs to you. You were never broken. You were being built. And if that hits something quiet inside you, something you felt for a long time but never quite had the words for, then you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Subscribe and stay close. Every week we come back to these conversations, the ones that go underneath the surface, the ones that treat you like the complex, deeply capable person you actually are. There's a lot more to explore, and I think the best stuff is still ahead.